welcome to today's edition of What's the Big Deal TV. Today's guest is Mike Strode, our Dill Pickle Board of Directors Secretary. Tune in to learn about the state of co-op culture in Chicago and how you can get involved in the Colonic Collaborative.
So I know you've been on the Dill Pickle Board of Directors for a few years now. What has been the biggest reward serving on the Board of Directors?
The biggest reward has been the stories that I am now able to tell. So I work within a lot of other cooperative spaces. I consider myself a solidarity economy organizer within the context of Chicago and even some national spaces. And so serving on the Dill Pickle Board has allowed me to ground sort of some of the theory that I've worked around within the solidarity economy in the real practice of trying to help, co-govern this, this $1 million business, that is the Dill Pickle Food Cooperative. So the biggest reward has been that learning and that activity that I'm able to share with other populations around those challenges, around the challenges of the store and around the challenges of this model.
Well, then how do you maintain balance between doing board work and your career?
You set your boundaries. When I joined, I think that what we talk about on our board orientation is like, this is between 5 and 10 hours a month of, service. And it's really in the context of a cooperative that since I joined in the fall of 2019 until now has been in a perpetual state of crisis of one way or another. You learn to kind of figure out where the boundaries are and say, all right, this is as much time as I can commit this month. Maybe I can extend a little more because I know that this is a particularly trying time, but there will always be another crisis to address. So yes, you set your boundaries and you communicate to your other board members about what those boundaries are.
I love boundaries.
They are wonderful, wonderful things.
I'm glad you know how to set them. Great. So I've heard about the Colonic Collaborative in relation to you, but I don't know much about it. Can you talk a little bit about what the Cola nut is?
Yes. So I'll start with the cultural symbolism before I'll go to the actual thing. So for those who may have some familiarity or may have none with West African culture, particularly Igbo culture and Yoruba, the Cola nut is this symbol of exchange, of trade, of hospitality, of connection between tribes, between households, between people. And so the Colonic Collaborative is a time bank. And, I'll go into that a little bit more for those who are not familiar, but time banking is simply trading time as a currency. So the Colonic Collaborative is currently Chicago's only service, skills, and labor exchange. So a place where people can go and post their skills, post the things that they want to offer to their community, post the things they need from their community, and exchange with one another those things using just time as the basis of exchange, right? 1 hour for 1 hour, 2 hours for 2 hours, and so on. So the Colonic Collaborative is meant to build upon the community resilience that we saw represented in the mutual aid uprising of 2020. But this has been going on since 2017, when the Colonic Collaborative launched. So that's a short summation of what the Colonic Collaborative is.
Okay. Yeah, I had no idea. That's really radical. And I now am going to have to research the Kola nuts because I learned a few years ago that I am part Yoruba from Nigeria. So I'm definitely going to have to do some more research. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I learned about time banks when I lived in Madison, Wisconsin, but I had never joined. But I like the concept and the idea, trading versus spending fiat money, currency.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it was time banking that brought me effectively to the Dill Pickle. Like, I started this time bank that led me to the Solidarity Economy Working Group of the DSA, which led me to the former marketing director, Ali, who was the person that convinced me, like, hey, you should go for the board. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't know anything about a board. So in a sort of sideways way, time banking and the Dill Pickle are things that that's how I connected with the Dill Pickle.
Are there ways that we can get involved with the Colonic Collaborative? You want to plug it real quick?
Certainly so. So anyone can put in a membership for the Colonic Collaborative. It's just you go to the Colonic Collaborative website, which is colanutcollab.org. That's KOLANUTCOLLAB.org. And if you go there, there's a join button where you can go ahead and click on that, see the membership information, see if you're interested. If you want to schedule a meeting with me, my contact information is on there, and I can kind of talk to you about time banking before you join. But anyone can join. It's open to, everyone throughout the city of Chicago. You even got a few folks in Evanston that have joined because they wanted to connect with some folks. But yes, if you want to plug into your community and you want to use this infrastructure for your community, we're very open to kind of, having folks engage that way.
Most definitely. Thank you. So I have a few more questions. In your own words, what is the state of co-op culture in Chicago, and do you see it expanding?
Co-op culture in Chicago has been challenged for a very long time, and it continues that way. There are some new developments, both with the Colonic Collaborative participated in the worker co-op legislation that passed at the top of 2020. So that basically created a legal entity that enabled worker cooperatives to form more easily. So that's one really great development, that worker cooperative legislation. But also, the city is looking at more ways that they can support worker cooperatives, housing cooperatives, and certainly, we're always advocating for food co-op support and, making sure that the food cooperatives that are, forming get the support that they need to kind of establish and root themselves. So I think that there are lots of promise, there's a lot of things that are promising about the co-op culture in Chicago that are in development, but it's never fast enough for someone like me who's looking and researching, Boston or Baltimore or Madison and, Oakland. And I'm seeing things and I'm like, man, I wish we were that far ahead. But, then you go talk to someone from those cities and they're like, that's
So then what do you think is the difference between New York, Minneapolis? Because those are co-op meccas, but Chicago is the third largest city in the U.S. Why are we so far behind in terms of having co-ops in our economy?
I don't know if I have a fully established theory. There are certainly some very unique nuances to Chicago that have prevented certain different types of co-ops from getting established. In New York, for instance, there was a really big push around amalgamated clothing workers getting their housing co-op established. So early on in the 1930s, there was this really, large industrial effort to establish housing cooperatives so that workers actually had a place to live, right? Now, they may not have, whomever the industrialists may not have been fully interested in, having housing cooperatives for workers, but it allowed there to be this big entity that was a shining example of housing cooperation early on in New York. We've not had really great examples of cooperation well established in Chicago. The biggest one or the oldest one was the Hyde Park Food Cooperative. And of course, that after 70 years, that closes in Hyde Park in 2011. So I think without having those anchor institutions, which is why I'm very passionate about the Dill Pickle being a thing that is established and exists and that fosters more cooperation, is because if you don't have those anchors, then people can't see the examples that allow them to create new models or to build on those models and to fix the mistakes that may be made along the way for these different cooperatives, right? I think if we'd had someone who could hold the history of the Hyde Park Food Cooperative and communicate that now to these cooperatives that are forming, that's a way that, new cooperatives join. But we don't have a really great cooperative history that's being held either in the food co-op space, the housing co-op space, the worker co-op space. So basically, everybody comes along every 10 years, they make the same set of mistakes, and then, another 10 years passes, and then some new folks come along, and another set of mistakes, the same set of mistakes happen. So we need something to connect people to the history and the legacy and the mistakes that were made and the successes that were had in order to pursue on. I just made that up in my head.
Agree. No, it makes total sense. If we don't know our history, how do we know where we're going? That's a proverb, right? Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. My last question. What is the best advice you would give someone who is interested in serving on any co-op board of directors? And I'm going to move around so the light comes on.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
the advice that I would give, I'm probably going to give the same advice I give to all cooperators, which is learn something about facilitation. I jumped into facilitation because I read a book on consensus, and then I was amazed that like meetings could have structure, right? Like meetings could have an agenda, they could have structure, you could have somebody paying attention to process, and I thought that was just so fascinating. So learning about consensus and then learning about facilitation for me is the heart of cooperation. We really need to be, as cooperators, paying attention to how we meet and how we discuss things. Because if we're not paying attention to that, then it's very easy for power dynamics to shift and for things to get, inequitable very fast in a conversation. So I would say that like learn about facilitation, learn your decision-making models, your decision-making structure. We use a very informal consensus or, an informal version of formal consensus. But whatever decision-making you're using, if you're using Robert's rules, just kind of learn how those decisions are being made. And if you feel good about how they're being made, always question, how those decisions go down and come through. And so I think if you pay attention to those things, you can kind of overcome and you can get through any challenges that you might be having on the board.
Facts. I used to sit on the board, and yeah, I didn't really familiarize myself with Robert's rules or the structure of decision making. Things get lost in translation, definitely. I think that's great advice. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, that concludes my questionnaire. Do you have any questions? Anything else you'd like to add?
I want to add. I want to add a plug for the Owner Linkage Committee. So for the folks who might be watching, get into the Owner Linkage Committee first Thursday of every month at 5 p.m. I serve as the chair currently, but I'm looking to hand that chair off. So if you're looking to sit on the chair of a committee, you as an owner are certainly, eligible to do that. But also, we've got our annual meeting that's about to come up, in October 25th, I want to say is the date. So look out for that. And then Owner Linkage is working on board recruitment right now. So if you have interest in serving on the board, now is the time to put in your interest form and to think about running for a seat on the board, because a cooperative thrives off all of the owners participating in meaningful and deep ways. So those are things that I think are really important to foreground. And, I hope to see some new faces at these different events that are coming up.
Oh, and when is the deadline to apply for the board?
The deadline for the board application is September 30th. Usually we did at the beginning of October, is when we begin to build the slate, because we have to put out the election materials at least 2 weeks in advance of this meeting. So yes, end of September. The interest form will be on the website soon. We'll have an election webpage up, but you should be getting that information from your brine materials or from the board's newsletter. And if you don't have those materials, if you're missing something, if you don't know how to get access to that interest form, email me, secretary@dillpickle.coop. I'm happy to facilitate making sure that you get the information that you need.
Great. And I will put all of the images I will insert the images into this video so people can have a visual representation of what you're talking about.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Yes, it's been a great opportunity to connect and talk.
I agree. Well, thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much, Jessica. And I bid you well on your journey to discover the Kola nut. First time to bite into one and experience that wonderful bitterness. The bitterness comes with the sweetness of connection.
Ashe. I'll let you know how it goes.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care. Have a good one.
All right. You too.